in search of better days.
Samm Marshall shares uplifting stories and conversations with people making Johannesburg and the world a better place.
As South Africa marks 25 years since the Promotion of Access to Information Act, the Information Regulator is taking stock of how far we've come and how to make this vital law fit for purpose in the digital age. Now, at the recently concluded Reform for Information Law Dialogue in Durban, held as part of the International Day for Universal Access to Information, leaders from across government, civil society and the private sector reflected on the power of transparency and the right to information as the cornerstone of democracy. Joining me now on the line is Ms. Alison Tilley, who's a part-time member and commissioner at the Information Regulator, to discuss why access to information remains critical for accountability, digital rights and inclusive governance, and how we can ensure that the next 25 years will truly empower citizens. Ms. Tilley, good morning and thanks for joining me.
That's a pleasure.
Let reflect for me, if you can, on this milestone that marks 25 years since the Promotion of Access to Information Act came into effect. Looking back, what has been in your mind the key successes and lessons that we've learned from the journey so far?
Well, I think the one of the key successes has been the knowledge that people have about their right to access to information. And the confidence that they have in asking for information and for records. From the regulator's point of view, we only have, I think it's 3 years now, jurisdiction where we are able to give orders around releasing access to information. And I think what we found is what many people have found over the years since the introduction of the Act, is that the principle is one thing, but when you actually ask people to release records, that's where it gets a bit stuck. And I think certainly from the regulator's point of view, we probably need to review our powers and create a framework in which we can order the release of information and release it. We're not sure exactly what that framework would look like to improve on what we have now, but it's certainly something that we are currently thinking about.
And I think that would also be, Alison, part of the dialogue that you had in Durban that focused on making the Act fit for purpose in a digital age. As you said, the Act and practically what was implemented or trying to manage it practically, it's kind of two different animals altogether. So talk to me about the dialogue that was held in Durban, and what were some of kind of the insights that you thought, well, maybe perhaps this is what some of the reforms that we need to that needs to be considered.
Well, I think one of the things we discussed, and I think it's come up in other fora, is this question of release of records that are electronic, so release of what they call open data. And of course, as it sounds, open data isn't something that you should have to do a request for information for. It should be open. And I think that that's one of the things that we are really needing to look at and try and encourage. There's certainly provisions in the Act now which require you to publish in a PAIA manual what records that there are that you have that you are making available proactively. It seems to me that that's the sort of one of the sensible places to focus, because it's all very well, making people do a request for information and fill in the form, and it's bureaucracy that really, ideally, you don't need. You should, especially in this day and age of websites and people having their cell phones, and they can use those to access those records. That should just be happening. And so I think that that's one of the areas that we're really interested in looking at.
Yeah, and I think many would agree that access to information is often called the foundation of all other rights. And that's why it's central to social justice, transparency, and accountable governance. Deputy Minister Andries Nel raised issues like, and I wonder how you, even as leadership, think about it. He raised issues like algorithmic transparency, platform accountability. How is the regulator thinking about digital technologies and their impact on information access?
Well, I think we have a dual mandate, and we also deal with data protection. So we have these different rights and different pieces of legislation that we're responsible for. And I think particularly in relation to AI and the advances we're seeing there, once those records are made available, when data sets are in the public domain, they get scooped up and put into the sort of black box that is AI. And what we see coming out the other end are sometimes these decisions where there is algorithmic bias. That the regulator can have two roles in this. I mean, the one is obviously making data available and encouraging open data. But the other thing is, from a data protection point of view, making sure that these decisions that are automatically reached, where there isn't a human involved, that is fair. And we have a number of tools in the Protection of Personal Information Act which we can use, which include helping people ask for the reasons that decisions were made about them and what the information was that was relied on. So I think we can play a role there. It's we've really seen the explosion in AI over this last year and a bit. So I think we're still needing to find our way. Certainly, I think there's a need for thinking about AI legislation, and that's something that I think we'd like to encourage. It's something that a number of different parts of government and different regulators would need to come together to think about. But it's certainly, I think it's definitely high on the agenda.
Yeah. I'm listening to you now, Alison, and I'm wondering, we often talk about, and you've talked to this at some length now, about kind of bridging the gap, right? And there is intent from your institution's side to make sure that citizens really understand the role that they play. And I'm sure many citizens still struggle to get information from both public and private bodies. But I was just potentially wondering whether in the dialogue that you had in Durban, if there was a consensus reached, or if there was some understanding, or even if it was highlighted, the lack of commitment from us ordinary citizens in understanding the role that an organization like yours play, and the effectiveness of a tool like the Promotion of Access to Information Act, and whether we sometimes, as part of this two-way relationship, whether we as just ordinary people haven't done enough to understand the role of the Act and the role of the organization.
Well, I think I'd put it differently. I would say that it's our job to make sure that people understand the role of the organization, and if they don't have that understanding, I would say that the blame should be put at our door.
Because I do find it, Alison, that people still struggle with kind of understanding it. And that's maybe why I'm asking the question, because I do, as somebody who gets the newsletters and is on your mailing list, I see the amount of content you put out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, on a yearly basis. And a lot of it is clear, and I'm just wondering whether the gray area exists because, and you're saying, and you've openly admitted that maybe you haven't done enough, but I wonder what is the responsibility from both parties here?
No, I think a fair point. People do need to be active. I'd say citizens, but it goes beyond citizens. People do need to be engaged in government, and they need to be engaged in democracy. They need to participate, and that's the only way that they will get the things done that they care about, which you range from, potholes through to, whether or not we have nuclear power reactors. It's a very broad range, and I think that once people have hold of the idea that the only way that they can engage is if they have the right information, I think that then the bug bites, and then once people understand that, I think they never really approach problems in the same way again, because they always then start with what records are there, what's available, what can I get hold of. And of course for South Africa, which is unique in the world, that we have this right to privately held records and in certain circumstances, but it really does range across pretty much everybody who's giving you trouble in your life. It's very broad, and I think that certainly the people that I know who understand how powerful these kinds of requests can be, it becomes just part of how they approach problem solving, which is great to see. But it's, for a lot of people, it's they have lives, they have things to do, they've got jobs, they've got kids. Getting information has to be easy, and I think that's where we really have to look at the proactive release of records, so that you can just go online, and then of course I would have to appeal to the other role players in this thing to look at the cost of data, because it has to be cheap, if not free. And so that's a whole nother area that needs to be looked at.
Now, obviously, when we talk about empowering communities, we know that communities, journalists, and civil society organizations, they can strengthen democracy, and they can hold institutions accountable. But I want to kind of, as we close the conversation, talk about, in the context of that, about collaboration and social capital, right? Transparency. Transparency at the moment seems to be this buzzword because we're going through the various commissions, and the one particular commission has really drawn South Africa's eyes and ears, and the word transparency keeps on coming around. But talk to me in the context of the Information Regulator and the PAIA Act, the Promotion of Access to Information Act. How do we then leverage transparency? If we just look at those three communities, the broader community, journalists, and civil society organizations, how can we then use transparency as a tool between government, business, and citizens to foster a culture of openness? How can we use that? Because I feel that we're now playing around with this word transparency. We're talking about openness, but I feel that we still might have a ways to get there.
Yes, I think we do have a ways to get there, and I have to commend the role of journalists again, and it's not just because I'm talking to you. I was really thinking over the weekend with the revelations that are being made. It's really has been so important that we have journalists who can pick up these stories and pick up the information and make sense of it for us, because that's also one of the problems with just getting information from a government or a municipality. You still need people who are going to be able to engage with that and tell you what it means. which is a sort of another role that we need to see. But if those journalists, and it applies to civil society organizations as well, if they are in a position to take that information and explain it to you, they have to have the information in the first place. And certainly in a number of processes that are underway, I mean, I can think of one or two where the regulator has become involved and ordered the release of records. So it's something that I think when people see what's happening on television, they don't necessarily connect it with their own lives and their own struggles, but that's the point, is that once you know and everybody knows and we can make sense and meaning of it, then we are able to diagnose what the problems are and find solutions. So I think it's very, very important that those role players do get information and as quickly and simply as possible, because that's the trick. You shouldn't have to work too hard. If many instances we know that the only way that information gets released is through whistleblowers, which is a sort of another whole area of work, and we need to strengthen protections for whistleblowers. But all of those things combined, I think you then start to really understand what is happening in the world around you, and you can make those decisions that you need to make based on solid evidence.
Alison Tilley, thank you very much for joining us.
That's a great pleasure.
That's Alison Tilley, part-time member and commissioner of the Information Regulator, talking to us about why access to information remains critical for accountability, digital rights and inclusive governance, and how we can ensure that the next 25 years of the Act truly empower citizens. I don't know if you know this, but South Africa is marking 25 years since the Promotion of Access to Information Act. So we're just taking a bit of stock, and this comes on the back, of course, of their recent Reform to Information Law Dialogue, which was held in Durban, and it was held on the International Day for Universal Access to Information. That's a wrap.